We have had an absolutely, I think, fantastic 2 days. I've been coming to GS1 conferences here and abroad for some time. I think this is the best conference I've been to, certainly the best of the 7 here in the UK. And that's a big thank you to all of you, because you've made it possible. I think it's benefited from, it's had less lectures and didactic presentations, and as you've just seen, a lot more interactive sessions, which I think has been a real engagement with the delegates, the people who are here to join in. On the other hand, boy, has it had a lot of acronyms. I have learned so many acronyms. PIM, NETIS, GLN, GTIN, EDC, NLP, FDP, FMD, RFID, SGTIN, and GIAI. That's just a few of them. Anyway, I've been asked to make sum up the 2 days in a way, and I'm an academic, a researcher, and you'll all know that research is just plagiarism by another name. So I am unashamedly going to use some examples from the sessions I've been in and the sessions you will have been in, and there's no harm in repetition. It's a great rhetorical advice the ancient Greeks recognized. President Mitterrand, famous French president, said, in talking to journalists, he said, politicians can only handle 3 messages. Ideally, the same message repeated 3 times. So you're going to get a little bit of that. So it's under 4 headings. It's a bit about GS1 generically, a bit about where we are now in the UK healthcare sector, a bit about future horizon scanning, and then just summing up. So you'll all know that GS1 is well, you may not all know that it's a not-for-profit. You may not know that it's one of 118 independent GS1 organizations worldwide. And in fact, in one of the sessions I was in, somebody said, I'd forgotten that the GS in GS1 stands for Global Standard. And that's been a theme through the whole 2 days. You just heard it today from Nata about the importance. If you don't have standardization, you don't have interoperability, you don't have integration. You have heard repeatedly that GS1 allows us in healthcare and in construction and in retail to identify people, products, places. It allows track and trace. In healthcare, it allows track and trace from manufacture to the point of care. But to paraphrase Buzz Lightyear, if not to infinity and beyond, it actually allows us to track patients beyond that point of care. People who have implantable devices or take drugs may be taking them lifelong till the day they die. And that's sometimes missed, that it's a longitudinal track and trace. It doesn't stop at the point of the intervention. It improves accuracy, consistency. That improves patient safety, reduces unwarranted variation, which Muir Gray has highlighted. And someone in a session yesterday said, not pejoratively, said, yes, scan for safety, sometimes called scan for savings. There's no harm in that. Every pound we save on healthcare means another pound invested in somebody else's hip replacement or cataract. If I have one beef, we give one of the GS1 staff in one of those breakout groups at the back a really hard time, because at the end of half an hour, we wanted him to rename the company and completely rename GS1 standards, which have been around since Wrigley Spearmint Gum in Chicago for over 50 years. So he went away with a bit of a sore head. But the point was, I think a lot of this conversations have been about getting clinicians buy-in, clinicians on board. I think the term standards is quite a deterrent. It's quite intimidating. I'm a doctor who practices medicine. People worry about standards because they think if a standard is something I have to meet. And if I don't meet that, I might be sued, I might be fired, I might be struck off. And I think much more current terminology would be, things that people would be familiar with would be, I have an iPhone tag on my cat. I print my own Ryanair tracker when I flew recently to Morocco. We're all familiar with that concept. I think GS1 standards is a bit, frankly, I think it's a bit old school. It is steeped in Wrigley Spearmint Gum 50 years ago. I think we should start talking about trackers or tags or some terminology that it gets across to people that this is just about, we live in a real world with things, operating theaters, instruments, screws, patients, people, wards, beds. GS1 standards are just a high-fidelity way of, as Lee said, codifying, translating information about real physical objects, real-world things, into ones and zeros, data that's in a data lake or in an IT system. And I think trying to get that across would be good, I think. So where are we with the health service now? As you just heard from Lee and Steve, Scan for Safety has been around since 2016. I became involved with GS1 in 2015. One of the things I was very keen to push was that the health service is naturally skeptical of people pushing innovation and new things to them. They're always worried that, is this just the profit motive, although GS1's not for profit. And providing evidence of efficacy is absolutely crucial in convincing people, whether it's a CFO, whether it's a chief nursing officer, whether it's a chief medical officer. And those pilots, I think, unequivocally demonstrated the benefits of barcode scanning as it was then. I think that's now a given. I haven't heard anybody in the last couple of days say we shouldn't be on this journey. So I think that generation of data, Keith Jones and Darby pointed out to me, and Lee Bond, I think, hinted about this, that it also generates data that allows, if you will, internal competition. Clinicians of all sorts, pharmacists, nurses, physios, doctors, they're all quite competitive people. And the number 10 Downing Street Nudge Unit, one of the ways they reduced antibiotic prescribing was just sending GPs how many antibiotics they prescribed compared to their next nearest practice, or indeed other GPs in their practice. And that use of data to drive, if not a private, a financial market, free market, but to drive competition within an internal system, I think is very powerful. And Lord Darcy had a previous triad before his 3 shifts you've heard about, when he did a previous review, which was about quality, safety, and value for money. And I think those pilots generated evidence that proved that in that nirvana, what would the ideal hospital look like? It would be high-quality care, safe care, and efficient value for money care. And I think what you've been hearing about for 2 days contributes to all 3 bits of that triad. That's now developed. You've heard yesterday, certainly, and running through the whole 2 days, that this isn't peculiar to England. There's programs now running in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and of course around the world globally. But I think the UK, in many ways, has led the way on the penetration into the healthcare system. Today, every hospital uses GS1. To paraphrase Lord David Pryor at a previous GS1 conference, this isn't Harry Potter. It's not some futuristic, difficult stuff. I'm a pediatrician. We use a thing called a Guthrie test. It's a 5-day heel prick blood sample on about 750,000 newborn infants every year in the UK to detect rare diseases that if they're picked up within the first few weeks of life, we can make a difference. That uses GS1 barcodes and has done for some time. We use blood transfusions. Blood transfusion service has used barcodes for many years to avoid people being given blood of the wrong group. You've heard about operating theaters, medicines. It's here right now. And then I heard from a breakout session both yesterday and today a bit more about so everybody's doing that. What some people are doing is even more adventurous. I'll take Leeds as the example because I've been to visit them, but also Papworth. Using global location numbers to track patients, to track people from the emergency room to the ward, to the MRI scanner, to the operating theater, to the recovery room, and knowing where they are at every single point in time. And then that helps you optimize the use of your finite number of beds. Often the NHS is running at 98% capacity. It's running too hot. Most of the private sector industries that Lee talked about, certainly Toyota wouldn't dream of running plant at 98%. But if you have to run it at that, having absolute up-to-date information of where all your kit is, where all your staff are, and where your empty beds are is absolutely crucial. What about the future? I think everything we've talked about is more relevant now than ever, given that one of Lord Darcy's 3 new triad is this wish to move from analog to digital. I mentioned yesterday that I wrote a piece in the British Medical Journal over 10 years ago about how analog the NHS was. It's moved a long way, but it really does need to move a lot farther and a lot more quickly. Now, that's going to be really difficult. In a breakout session yesterday, I was hearing about the new build hospital, one of NATA's projects probably, which is Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn, which has got huge problems with that rotting concrete. I spent 5 days in King's Lynn Hospital during the pandemic when I had a road traffic accident and fractured my pelvis, and I'm delighted they are going to have a new hospital, and that's going to be built from the bottom up with all of this technology built in. It'll have GS1 standards from the get-go with RFIDs embedded at the time of construction. But that kind of thing's going to be quite difficult to do. There's a lot of external factors that are militating against that ambitious New World program. So to take a few, there's the abolition of NHS England, which always introduces a degree of turbulence and change and inertia. There is the financial reset within the NHS. There's the last budget that increased the national insurance contributions. There is the war in Ukraine leading to an increase in defense spending. There are Donald Trump's tariffs. And there's the fact that the UK economy more generally is not performing very well, and so tax receipts aren't what was hoped for. So right now, there isn't a huge sum of money. Lee said he was envious of Leeds in 2016. These aren't boom years with lots of money. And yet all of us know you have to invest to save. Unfortunately, the return on investment on this kind of stuff is beyond a parliamentary cycle in the UK. So it is a really big challenge when all the pressure is on in-year savings for anybody to try and do the sort of stuff we've been talking about over the last 2 days. I think if Jim Mackey was here or other people, what they would say if someone said, well, but there's no money to do this, they'd say, well, actually, there's 200 billion. That's what we spend, over 200 billion in the NHS each year. You're going to have to disinvest to reinvest. You're going to have to decide what you're going to stop doing. The real problem with that, which I discovered one of my previous roles was as chair of the Health Research Authority, developing a completely new IT system. The previous one, written by 2 Bulgarians 15 years ago, not very resilient. If they fall under a bus, that's it. But you have to have dual running. While we're fixing the aeroplane while it's flying and developing the new IT system, we have to keep the old Bulgarian system running. We have to keep paying them. We have to keep paying for the backup servers. And I think it is a real big financial challenge to do this kind of stuff. But we need to do it. And I think that's probably where I want to finish by summarizing. GS1 standards, as Lee pointed out, save money. So we need to tackle that inertia or that antipathy to doing this because there's no money around by getting people to recognize it is going to save money, even in the short term, in terms of better procurement and stock control. It's going to release time to care for patients, which improves productivity, which is another big part of the zeitgeist at the moment. And it reduces harm to patients. And harm to patients is estimated to cost the NHS billions and in money, and a lot of clinician time correcting avoidable errors. So my final sentiment is, if you're not on board, you're now an outlier. You remember that advert, the future is orange? I'd say my take home is the future is digital. That is where we absolutely got to get to. When I was a young doctor or academic, I remember coming back from a conference, and my head of department said to me on the Monday morning, so what did you learn from the conference? And I was I'd learned a lot probably, but I wasn't prepared to be asked. When you go back to your organization tomorrow, I think if you're asked or you mentally go through, do the thought experiment, what have I learned over these 2 days? I think the question you should ask yourself is, how does your organization measure up compared to the kind of the people at the front of the curve that you've been hearing about over the last 2 days? Because that's where we've all got to get to over the next few years. So I'm fortunate. I'm maybe the one person who doesn't get to be asked any questions. lucky. But I'm going to hand over to Chris Tyas, OBE, to make the closing address. Thanks, Chris.